Okay, everyone. So I'm just going to continue. I wanted to address the issue of services that are available to um, work with the problem of childhood sexual abuse. Here in Pennsylvania, specifically in Philadelphia, where I'm located, is the Philadelphia Children's Alliance, which is part of a national nonprofit that works to provide a multitude of services for children that have made reports of child sexual abuse. So there's a hyperlink there to their website. They have a wealth of information there. Philadelphia Children's Alliance, they do forensic interviewing. If a child reports abuse, the police are involved. All the interviews are done at Philadelphia Children's Alliance as opposed to in a police station. The Support Center for Child Advocates, also a hyperlink there for that, is located in Philadelphia. This is another nonprofit that works with attorneys who volunteer their time to help children in court environments. In other words, there's a family court case. The attorney volunteers to represent the interest of the child. There's an attorney for the parent. There's an attorney for the state or the city. So they provide a lot of assistance, both of these organizations. There are mental health professionals on staff there. And of course, Department of Human Services statewide is where reports are made. Records are kept, and they carry out the investigations. But we have the Children's Alliance Support Center for Child Advocates here in Philadelphia to help they're almost like a protective factor in a way on a systemic level. Next, I want to talk about micro social work with this population. On the screen, you're seeing 3 evidence-based interventions. Again, there's a hyperlink to a document that actually it's an entire document designed to share programs for children around preventing child sexual abuse. So there's the body safety training intervention, which is for ages 3 to 7. This entails modeling, rehearsal, reinforcement, feedback, talking about touching, ages 4 to 8. They use photo lesson cards, take-home letters to parents, posters, videos, and song and storybooks. And then for ages 6 to 12, there's feeling yes, feeling no. Videos are used, there's group discussion, there's role-playing, and there's also a program called Who Do You Tell, which is, if you click on that hyperlink, you'll be able to find actually some very detailed information about these evidence-based interventions. Okay, so meso interventions, I'd like to keep in mind cultural humility, intersectionality, and multiculturalism. Specifically, cultural humility, having self-awareness, openness, and transcendence, which is this idea that there's a God or there's a higher power, there's something operating in the universe. Keeping that in mind helps with practicing cultural humility. Intersectionality, what's going on in society where it meets the child welfare system, the client, the worker. What is each person's history, culture, race, class, gender, and how do all of these pieces affect the well-being of the child? So we have to kind of consider all of these factors when we're looking at protecting children. And then, of course, multiculturalism. Am I a culturally competent therapist or social worker? Do I recognize the cultural differences between me and the child that's abused? What are our individual differences? What these 3 things do, it asks us, to consider the person in an individual, more of an individual story, as opposed to, this is my one African American client, and this is how all African Americans view child sex abuse. Or I only see African American clients, and so therefore I'm an expert, and I understand why things are the way they are based on this kind of vacuumed experience. So I really believe that cultural humility, intersectionality, and multiculturalism kind of keep both of those, both ends of that spectrum in check. I think that's very important, not just in addressing and working with child sexual abuse, but in social work in general. Macro interventions, social workers can work to change laws, kind of like what I talked about earlier. We can get involved in, going to our local representatives, going to the Senate, and really advocating, which is the next point on the arrow. What am I doing to help my clients navigate this bigger system, this Department of Human Services? I think that's where organizations like the Philadelphia Children's Alliance and the Support Center for Child Advocates really comes into play. And also engaging and empowering victims. I don't think that we can underestimate the importance of empowering our clients as social workers so that they can move and not stay stuck. And I think by working from a legal standpoint, from a government standpoint, and an advocacy standpoint, that we naturally reach that type of empowerment. And we're speaking on behalf of children that don't have a voice when we do these things. So in conclusion, I want to leave you with this staggering statistic that each year there's about 80,000 reports of child sexual abuse. Now, if you recall back at the beginning of my presentation, there was testimony in the Senate back in the 1970s that there was an estimate of about 30,000 reports or allegations or instances of child sexual abuse because they weren't being reported yet at that time. But that was the Senate testimony by the expert. And you can see, that's more than doubled. But again, this is a very conservative number. Because I think the statistic that I mentioned earlier was about 38% of children disclose. So when you think about that, this number's, pretty much more than double if we make an educated guess. And why is that? Well, there's underreporting, there's stigma. There's still a huge stigma when it comes to child sexual abuse. As I mentioned earlier, in sibling sexual abuse cases, even the people that are there, that are in place to protect children, fail to report a large part of the time. And children also don't report because, there's fear that they won't be believed. There's fear that they'll be blamed. They may have been threatened. There's a lot of shame. There's overwhelming shame. There's, if you're a child and you have you need certain people to survive. And if most perpetrators are family members or people that we know, we kind of, as children, need our adults to be dependable. We depend on them for food, shelter, affection. So maybe weighing that risk is a little bit too high for kids when they're thinking about disclosing. And finally, I don't think you can mention child sex abuse without mentioning the lifelong psychological effects that it leaves a large part of survivors with. There's anxiety, depression, personality disorders. There's developmental problems. There's eating disorders. There's self-harming behaviors, substance abuse issues. There's just an enormous there's enormous baggage with childhood sexual abuse, and that's why advocating, reporting, and supporting is so important when a child does disclose. Thank you.